All right, good afternoon. I'm going to start after lunch. I hope everybody is ready to listen to one interesting presentation. My name is Jovan Strika. I'm representing Macrotick. Macrotick is a manufacturer of networking equipment. It's all based on the MikroTik boards, but we're trying to bring it to the kind of more enterprise level. We're leveraging MikroTik stuff as well as software, RouterOS, as well as the scripting language, and we also developed the platform for cloud monitoring management, and it is based on the MikroTik scripting language. I don't know if some of you visited Pittsburgh last year. I did a presentation how we can do the monitoring of MikroTik devices from the cloud, and instead of using ICMP or SNMP protocols, we explained how you can use push method from the router to the cloud over HTTP or HTTPS protocol. And today's presentation is sort of an extension of that last year presentation, where I'm going to focus more on a management aspect rather than on the monitoring. But it's similar concept how we communicate between the cloud and the routers. So I'm going to first review a couple of management options available for MikroTik, and then talk a little bit about configuration files, how you can create them to rapidly deploy devices, and I'm going to segue into the scripts, what is the power and what you can do with the scripts, the add-on features that you can achieve with the additional scripts on the router. And then I'll demonstrate how you can upload versus download this configuration, meaning using the HTTPS to bring the configuration to the board. And then I'll present a demo of this whole cloud provisioning process. So Routerboard can be configured pretty much in these three main ways, using the Winbox, which is the Windows-based utility, the WebFig, which is browser-based and pretty much looks very similar to Winbox, and Terminal, known as a CLI or kind of a command line interface for managing the router. And you can access Terminal through Telnet or SSH, or open a terminal window within the Winbox or even WebFig, and then have access to all the router commands using the command line. When you look at these three interfaces, they are very similar. Almost 100% features are possible across all these three interfaces. You can achieve the same configuration settings no matter which interface you use. It's really more from the convenience level, where Winbox ends up being sort of more popular way to manage the routers. What was really impressive that MikroTik was able to keep consistency between the features and what you can do with Winbox between the different firmware version as well as architectures or models. So the good news is that once you kind of understand how to operate MikroTik, you can do with any different model and every different board. But it takes time to kind of really get yourself being expert in managing the MikroTik. And unfortunately, there is no sort of a simple interface. Maybe a quick setup is the only sort of simplified way to get a box up and running without previous good knowledge on the MikroTik. Where compared with some other vendors, usually their web interfaces are sort of a stripped down version of the management, more for end users. Where you use the CLI or terminals for more expert type of commands, as you know, the Cisco interfaces versus other routers. But it's clearly a power of MikroTik is all the options and configuration, and you need to have the access. It's always trade-off between how you achieve simplified communication and fast deployment, but not lose all these options. And clearly, it is a trade-off. But especially when you are bringing as a ISP or enterprise customer, IT personnel who needs to kind of get into the MikroTik, there's always that barrier to entry. And what we try to do here is to simplify that process, and using configuration scripts, how we can get it up and running systems, and then let first and second level deal with the configurations, and then third level, who is really more specialized for managing this router, then they get into Winbox and some other advanced tools. And when you look at the Winbox or Webfig and terminal, you need to be able to access the router. So if you're in a LAN, that's clearly convenience, but if you are accessing remotely, that router needs to be accessible. And in more and more deployments where the networks of ISPs are internal, private, you don't necessarily have always access to the customer routers, especially if it's a double net firewall. It might not be always convenient to get to the router to do the management. So when you look at the terminal is a very, I would say, advanced way to achieve certain things because you can link several different commands to configure a router in sort of one shot. But I see a barrier often with the customers getting into a terminal, how you really do this. They like the convenience on the Winbox. So I wanted to show very kind of a quick way to get yourself knowledgeable about terminal if you understand the Winbox. So if you see on the right side, there is a simple screen where you configure the IP address on the Winbox utility. And basically, what is on the left side is just a way kind of how you can get that commands in the terminal. What you see here, first command is IP address print, which actually tells you that the IP address that is displayed, 192.168.88.1, you can see that it's already configured. If you go into that segment IP address and you do the export file called name export IP address, and you use the compact attribute, you end up saving the configuration file, which you can see here. If you go to file print, that document, that file is saved locally, and you can, it's a text file. You can retrieve it to your computer and look at the commands, but you can also open content of that file within the terminal, and you can see that the way how to achieve that configuration, there is a command IP address and then add address and etc. And I always like to say, if you don't be scared on terminal, if you know how to achieve certain things in a Winbox, very quickly you can find out how to achieve that using the terminal. And then if you are able to understand the main commands, how to configure the box, then you can go a step further. All these commands can be joined into one file, configuration file. If you're not sure exactly how to achieve that file, you can use the export commands and grab pieces of the router or pieces of the configuration that you need, or you can actually go into a main root directory and then do the export, and it will actually save the whole configuration of the device into one file. And by adding this compact, it actually gives you only the relevant information that you made on the router. Using this file and just copy pasting that file into another device, you can create a clone very rapidly. And through that file, you can see exactly what are things added and how it's configured, and then pick and choose depending of what that different router has to be, how it can be configured and what you want to enable. So in a sense, that configuration file is just a group of commands, which also, if you save and you upload that file, instead of copy pasting in terminal, what you can do is to use the command called import. And then with import, basically process that command, executes, and you have the configured router. So when you look at this, the whole process of actually getting configuration into one file and then distributing this file, it's much faster and simpler than going one by one router and then doing the configuration, because you will necessarily, after dozens of routers, end up having inconsistency between the configurations. So what we kind of took that command and that configuration files. Scripting is, again, extension, bringing this all on another level. MikroTik scripts are proprietary language that MikroTik is executing on its own router board. And besides the configuration that you can write and read the configuration settings, there are also other tools and other utilities available through the scripting, including variables, local or global, that you can use to store, remember some information, retrieve later on, and then based on these answers, execute some other scripts or perform some other operations. Scripting is very simple. It's a text tool, text-based. Unfortunately, lacking debugging tools, so it's not always easy to figure out what's going on with script and how to write them down. Pretty much when you double click on a script, this is on the right side, it's a snapshot of the script list on a Winbox. If you double click, it opens up a kind of a text input field that you can kind of type it in, but pretty much if you need to debug, you have to kind of write the log messages or a put message that shows you in the terminal what's going on and kind of try to figure out where the problem is. So I know that that's a part that MikroTik is kind of lacking, but it's a great from the feature set and what it allows you, because pretty much scripting is one of the things that differentiate MikroTik from many other vendors. Because that scripting then allows you some other additional features which I'm going to present in the next slide. But just as a sample how to write the script, this is a sample of 3 lines. You are creating a local variable, my local message, setting up the value, and then later with a log command, you're outputting that log, that message into the log file. So when you take that scripting capabilities, what was really interesting is all the different features and functionalities that people start writing them, put it on the MikroTik website, and I provided a few links. You have first information about scripts, but also quite a bit of examples of different scripts. And when you think about it, every router is sort of deployed in its own different environment, have a different use case, and therefore not all those scripts should be in the router. I think the way how it's designed, it's really interesting. It's almost like an add-on, almost like a, I don't want to say app store, but you kind of throw the apps and throw the scripts that you need and they perform certain things. And some examples are, for example, traffic prioritization. You look at the traffic and then flag, it works together with the queuing and some other elements that are built in, but gives you more intelligence for processing what you really want to achieve. Failover between the WAN connections. That's another example where you can kind of sense the first connection is down and then maybe turn on, is it 3G or LTE or some other way to get alternative link if it's not all the time present, and then reroute this traffic to another link. You can have a dynamic DNS updates if you have static IP that needs to be updated on fly. Then there is several scripts about advanced firewall rules, processing, creating a kind of lists, blacklist, whitelist, web filter. There is a few interesting scripts for creating almost like a content filtering within the scripting, and then you have different monitoring and reporting scripts, sending email or pings, or we heard today there was a SMS and different ways to kind of interact. And when you look at this, all of them depends on how you want to use and where you use your router. Some of them might be irrelevant for you, and some of them might be very useful and clearly differentiate than any other router out there. So I encourage you to kind of go browse, and it's very easy. Just click download and copy paste, and then kind of play with it. Don't be afraid. As you see, the commands are very simple, and all you can do is, the worst can be that it doesn't work. So that's allows you to really play. Obviously, don't do it on a production router. But when you look at this from the extension to this whole plan of scripts and the configuration files, what we end up doing, we look into what are the challenges that we saw when we tried to kind of provision a lot of customers with the different configuration files, and how to really make that more manageable. And what MikroTik has as one of the features and one of the commands is the fetch tool. Fetch tool is able to connect to remote site or remote server, and in this case download the file, and it's using HTTP or HTTPS or FTP protocol to communicate to the server. And why this is important is because it is initiated from the router, meaning that you don't have to connect to the router. If your device is behind the firewalls, as long as it has the access to the internet, it will be able to reach that destination. When you look at the comparison between, uploading these scripts now or configuration files using FTP or Winbox, you need to be connected. That device have to be reachable. With the download with the fetch, you don't have to be. Connection is not secured, but we heard today that they're making a more SSL based for the new version of the Winbox. But when you look at the connection over the fetch, if you use HTTPS, it will be encrypted. Privacy concern, there was a lot of challenges when we see customers giving for their employees access to the router. And the customers were saying, well, pretty much if you have access to the router, there's no privacy, you have all visibility of the content and LAN and etc. Where if you're delivering using this method where you leave the configuration and it gets downloaded, they don't need access to the router, and that way you also protecting the privacy. And then the last part is that automating this is essential. If you have to upload one by one connection, there are some ways to kind of create a script that log in SSH, FTP into multiple routers. But on the other hand, if you are using the fetch command and you wrap it into the script, which is actually able to schedule every so often, you can then initiate that download periodically, and they're all coming from the centralized location. So when we designed that whole system, we came up with several different requirements and a combination of small scripts that are, what is very important, light in a process. It's happening every couple of minutes, or you can kind of adjust how often, but it executes checks on the data center if you have anything for me, and then if there is configuration file, it kind of downloads and it gets executed. So I did I didn't want to risk doing it live, so I kind of captured the small demo on recording. But basically what you see here is on the right side is a text file called MCK simple. It's attached to the particular device. And then you can end up creating the commands. That commands can be one-time configuration that you want to execute, and pretty much when it executes, it kind of forgets about it. Then you can have a certain files that you want as a scripts being delivered and stored. And then you can also have scripts that will continue being executed over time, depending on, again, what you're trying to deliver through that configuration file. But that configuration file, when you are creating, it's actually, at the end, creating a hash of that configuration file. And in that case, if there is any changes in that file, the routers will recognize that there is a change and then do the update. Because the part that we realize is that the challenge is how you, over time, if you want to adjust with the new features, or let's say update your address list or blacklist or change the time server, how you don't, you want to keep configuration and then approve over time. And all the routers will recognize that change and sort of download. And what you see here is on the left side, the list of several different scripts that are running, and they're using a global variables to know what's exactly happening. The scheduler is actually keep looking for the executing script called MCK downloader, which is actually checking what's going on the server, is there's anything for me. And again, the CPU, you can see, it is the fully functional router. It's also doing routing, but it never spikes to the point that should be any concern. And then over time, when you see the configuration here has only one IP, what we did, we just added a second one and created a log message. And in a few seconds, you will see that there will be another script showing up here, which is called MCK sample. So the system recognizes that there is a new file that should be pushed, and then it will be downloaded. Yeah, there it is. So it's basically came back. And then this script currently has only one log message and just adding the IP address. But as I mentioned, you can embed different scripts that will remain permanently on the board, and some of the features, when optimization, etc., can be example of that script. So right now we have only one IP address, and this script was not automatically run, but you can flag to be automatically run. As it was executed manually, you can see these messages from script, the log, as well as the IP address delivered. So this is a very kind of simplified idea and presentation of what you can do. But I heard a lot of deployments, especially wireless ISP. They have their own way of configuring all the settings. So imagine putting something like this in an automated process, and then as certain things approved, MikroTik introduce another feature or functionalities, then that configuration can be upgraded and take the advantage of that extra feature that was enabled in the new firmware. So there was a lot of these ideas that you can kind of come up with, and I think from where we see the most use is certainly centralized provisioning of the multiple routers, but we also look into able to configure custom settings for particular routers. So it's not just the group of routers. You can kind of, depending on how you set up your system and your servers, you can either attach some scripts only for specific customer, meaning PPPoE, username and password is very specific to the router, where some of them can be kind of shared between the multiple of them. So personalization, then clearly enabling add-on features and services. So idea was really more to create a framework there rather than directly solution how that will be used. And we would like to hear what you see as a potential use of this kind of application, and do you see any kind of improvements and ideas? Please see us. We're exhibiting, and also I'm quite interested to see what else you might come up with. And we also introduced the new board, the new application. It's a MikroTik router with integrated Raspberry Pi as the application card. That's kind of very new, and we're quite interested to hear what else you might see as another application for that type of integration. Because again, it's all about taking where MikroTik brought a basic functionalities, but how we bring that to the next level. So having a certain vertical applications, yes, scripts can certainly give you some features, but very often you need more than just the what you can achieve with a script. And idea was bringing the application card into the router, being this in case is 2011, and soon will be 3011 into the board, and having the another application card that is internally cross-connected and still under the UPS. This board has the actually built-in UPS, so you get that robust application, but together on a price point that is 10 times less than any kind of router with the application card available from Cisco, Juniper, or others. So certainly these are all the ideas kind of to spark, and I would like to hear what else you have in mind. Well, thank you. I don't know if you have any questions, but that's all from me. Thank you.